Hi, this is Matt Shepard, and on this edition of Shep, Shower, and Shave, rediscovering an identity, trying to shake one and trying to create one as well. Shep, Shower, and Shave, proudly brought to you by Hungry Howie's, the Michigan-based pizza company known as the original flavored crust pizza and the best fundraiser. Go to doughraiser.com to find out more. By Northwestern Tech, HVAC is all they teach. They've perfected their hands-on program for the last 38 years. Find them on the web, northwesterntech.edu, or call them right now, 248-358-4006. And brought to you by Nate Noth Designs. He is the creator of the Shep, Shower, and Shave logo. You can find his outstanding work on Instagram or on Facebook. What an exciting weekend of football, an exciting weekend of sports in general, if you think about it. I mean, Red Wings win over Edmonton last night. Pistons are alone in first in the Central Division because of back-to-back wins against Milwaukee and then against Sacramento. Michigan State, very impressive. Michigan, very impressive, right? All those things, very positive for the state of Michigan. I want to talk about trying to shake the identity first, and then we'll get into rediscovering one. I hate the phrase, same old Lions. It's easy for us in the media to fall into the trap, thus creating the same type of trap for you as fans. I cannot blame people for constantly going there. I can't, because this is a team right now that has not been able to create, find, or keep a positive identity. The identity is that this is a team that beats the teams it is supposed to beat, but cannot beat the teams that you would be stunned if they did create a victory over, right? Okay. I mean, think about it. Look at their schedule right now, and I know we probably do this too often, but we look at certain teams and say, that's a good win. Really, deep down inside, if you were a coach or if you were a player, if you were close to that team, every win would be a good one, because we would all recognize just how difficult it is to win in sports and win in the NFL on a regular basis. But beating the Cardinals does not invoke a great deal of confidence for you. Beating the Giants doesn't do the same. Losing to the Falcons is relatively legit because they're a team that went to the Super Bowl a year ago, but you would feel a hell of a lot better had they won that game. The win at Minnesota is a really impressive win. They're 6-2. They're a really good. Don't give me the Case Keenum was in there at quarterback. Stop with the whole Dalvin Cook was out. All right, because if that's the case, then I'm going to bring up Taylor Decker being out for Detroit, Ziggy Ansah being out for Detroit a year ago, missing guys like Jared Davis this season. Stop with the whole they're an injury away from beating the Lions, because then I can use that back on you, all right? Just give credit where credit is due. I know it was 14-7. I know the defense dominated. I don't give a shit. The bottom line is that's a good win. Losing to the Panthers makes you and I kind of go, I'm not sure who that is. I'm having a hard time figuring that one out, because I look at Green Bay. I look at Carolina sometimes, and I think to myself, good team? Sure. Then I see them other games, and I think, not a very good club, right? Losing to the Saints, getting blown out by the Eagles. Well, actually, it wasn't a blowout. It was close. Getting blown out by the Bears, right? They lost 17-3 to Chicago. But it's a team 2 years removed from a Super Bowl, and a team that is now fighting New Orleans for the best record in their division. And speaking of New Orleans, you and I both thought that was kind of a weak loss to start, especially since they put up 52 on you. But now that they've won, 6 in a row? Now it doesn't look so bad. And then the Steelers. A lot depends on whether it's at home or not. Detroit has lost a couple of games at home. They lose to the Falcons. They lose to the Panthers. Actually, the Steelers, too. That's 3 games lost at home. That's really hard. Tonight is vital for this team's playoff hopes. Yeah, I teeter on must win. Now, sometimes that's difficult for me because it's a team that's 3-4. All right, we haven't even reached the midway point yet. But if you remember my podcast from earlier this year, I said if they were 4-4 after 8 games, you should feel pretty good because of the injury to Decker and because of their schedule and how their schedule, quote-unquote, lightens up. After tonight, it's Cleveland, winnable, Chicago, who you and I both thought was more winnable than probably we think now, Minnesota, a chance to sweep, Baltimore not the same Ravens team that we witnessed 5-6 years ago, Tampa, come on. I mean, the whole Jameis Winston, this is a W with the fingers and stuff. Shut up, man. Okay, this isn't college. Take that crap back to Florida State. Knock it off. Bears, Bengals, Packers at home. All right, much, dare I say, easier, more manageable. How's that? More manageable in the second half than the opening half. But this of the schedule. But this tonight, vital. You lose this, I think they're done. I mean that. I think they're done. You lose this, suddenly you got 5 losses, and I know what the naysayers may go, or the supporters. Hey, Shep, we could win out. You could win the last 8 games. Okay. Considering Detroit has won no more than 2 in a row this year, I find it hard to believe they're going to win 8 in a row. But you're right if that's the logic. It's an uphill battle. You're going to look back. I know you're constantly thinking back to the Matt Flynn game in which he threw for, 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, whatever it was. That enviable task that I was there. I was at that game. It was brutal. I was so I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What people forget that day, though, against the Lions, it was Matt Flynn's second start. All right? Second start. This is Brett Hundley's second start. Now, you look at that game against Detroit at Lambeau Field back in 2000, and it was January 1, 2012 is what it was. And here's what people forget. Matt Stafford was unbelievable that day. He was. He was absolutely incredible at Lambeau. It didn't matter because the defense couldn't do squat. Could not stop him. Could not stop Matt Flynn and the way they executed. And that leads you and I to believe, and anybody who doubts this, who is surprised at this, doesn't follow sports, doesn't follow trends. It leads you to believe that Green Bay should be favored tonight. And they should be favored because of what Mike McCarthy's done. Okay? I don't care what happened back in 2012. All right? It was 6 touchdowns. I just looked it up. 45-41. It was 6 touchdowns. And you look at the whole statistics offensively, that was a lot of fun to watch. It really was. It was a lot of fun to watch. Because I remember, but Matt Stafford threw for 5. He threw for 520 yards and 5 touchdowns in that game. But people don't remember that. They remember Matt Flynn because Green Bay won. Green Bay is 18-4 and 10-1 at home against Detroit under Mike McCarthy. Let me repeat those scary numbers. 18-4 overall, 10-1 at home against Detroit. You know the Packers have won 24 of the last 25 in the state of Wisconsin against Detroit. You also need to know this. They've won 19 of the last 23 overall and 27 of the last 33 in the series. They've won 10 of the last 13 regular season games and have the best record in the NFC, 4th best record in the NFL over that span. Only KC, Pittsburgh, and New England are better. They're coming off a bye week. The previous 4 times the Packers have lost heading into the bye, they have won each game immediately following the bye. 3 of those 4 games took place at Lambeau against division opponents. Green Bay is going to play at home the week after the bye for the 5th time in Mike McCarthy's coaching regime. The Packers have won each of the previous 4. The Packers have won each of the 6 previous matchups against NFC teams in the week after the bye. Since the start of 2014, the Packers are tied for 3rd in the NFL in home winning percentage. In other words, this game is going to be really difficult. Green Bay's 49, 18-1. They're in the regular season against the NFC North under Mike McCarthy. A division that ranks number 2 in the NFL since 2006. Let me repeat that. Green Bay against NFC North opponents in the Mike McCarthy era have a winning percentage of 73%. There's only one team that's better, New England, against the AFC East. They have a winning percentage of 77.5%. Now, what I want to see Detroit do, but I've asked for this for a long time, what I want to see the Lions do is create an identity. They don't have one right now. I think their defense has been very good. If you want to say it's a team that thrives on turnovers, okay. Or creates and thrives on turnovers, sure. That's part of it. Yeah. They're not a good running football team. They're not a good passing football team. They're not so good defensively that it makes you forget the 85 Bears or the great Ravens teams or the Steel Curtain Steelers or the Bob Lilly-led Cowboys or the Randy White-led Cowboys. They're not those teams. Maybe you feel like they don't have to have an identity. Like, I'm not sure exactly what Atlanta's identity was a year ago, and they went to the Super Bowl. We always view New England's identity as Belichick and Brady. Could be. What is Detroit's identity? Now, in the past, in fairness, they were a passing team. Matt Stafford, Calvin Johnson. What did that get them? Not very far. But they're rudderless right now. It's a team that cannot run. They spent $76 million on the right side of the offensive line, folks, and they still can't run the football. That's a problem. They have a hard time throwing it, okay, because Stafford's either getting his ass kicked, he's on his back, or he's throwing wide, or guys are dropping balls. Darren Fells in the end zone. Golden Tate, inexplicably. No reason whatsoever. Marvin Jones off the face mask. Strange, isn't it? That's what I want to see. I want to see some type of identity formed for this club. I want to see them go out there and, this is a cliche, but enforce their will on the opposition. I don't know if it's fair to say that, look, this is a game that Matthew Stafford has to win. I was at a party the other day and somebody told me that this is a party, or this is a game Matthew Stafford has to win. I said, based on what? How about just the Lions win? Seriously, what do I care? I don't. So, in other words, let's go back to 2012. He throws for 520 yards and 5 touchdowns. His team doesn't win because they can't stop Matt Flynn, but you're going to tell me that he can't win a big game because of that. His performance was pretty flipping good, but it's not good enough. Right? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I know what the record is against sub-500 teams. I've told you this time and time again, and I've given you examples of other quarterbacks when it comes to teams who are playing teams that are 500 or better. Matt Stafford's record is the worst among those examples, but there's not a lot of guys that you're writing home to and saying, that guy is going to be hard to beat no matter who he plays or where he plays them. I would like to see Matthew Stafford be better. I know he threw for 423 yards against Pittsburgh, no touchdowns. You want it when it counts in the red zone, because the red zone he wasn't very good. He was 2 for 11 in the red zone. Threw for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns against New Orleans. Wasn't good enough because they got pounded 52-38. At what point do we look at it and say, that's a good performance, it's not on him, or he's got to be better despite that performance. I don't know. That's up to you, the individual. As you're watching the game, this is a key drive. I want to see him respond here. I'm with you. I get it. I totally understand it. I just want you to know most quarterbacks outside of Tom Brady, even the great Cam Newton, even the love affair this town has with Jameis Winston, there are guys who at times fall short. And sometimes it's because of a long field because of their defense. Sometimes it's because somebody dropped a pass during a drive that killed a 3rd down and 11 and was right there. Are you remembering that? I don't know. Sometimes it's because you don't have the running game, and sometimes it's because the Q is just not good enough that day. I'm willing to have that debate or accept that fact in each of those examples, unlike most Lions fans. Most Lions fans go out there and say, no. I don't give a crap how many yards he threw for. I don't care how many touchdowns he threw for. He's got to win the game. I used the example of a year ago, 8 fourth-quarter comebacks. The response is always this: shouldn't have been behind in the first place. What planet are you on? It happens all the time. Kirk Cousins did a hell of a job with Washington yesterday against Seattle. And Seattle's a pretty good club, right? I think so too. They've got to create an identity. They've got to, and look, the identity doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be, well, we run the ball really well. We throw the ball really well. The identity could be, we line up, we punch you in the mouth, we can get that first down, we can get that touchdown any way we want. That's what it is. Sometimes that identity leaves you. But for the most part, the identity of a football team stays true to form, week in and week out. And that's what you're hoping for. That's what you need. That's what makes a team great. The Lions do not have that right now. And that's bothersome, really bothersome to me, because it's a team that has had plenty of time to do just that. Now, a lot of this is going to be on the quarterback, the coach, and the offensive coordinator, because those guys have been in the crosshairs for a while. Those are the guys that are expected to do more. I get it. I totally understand that. And I think they do too. That comes with the territory. They've got to be better than Green Bay tonight. They've got to turn their season around tonight, but they've got to buck some serious, difficult trends that have gone against them, or more importantly, gone in favor of Green Bay. Personally, I don't see that happening. All right? Why? Because I'm having a hard time believing in this team. Based on what they've done so far, what has given you any reason to think they can continue to do it on the road against that team in this big moment? It's interesting when Rob Rubik and I talk quite a bit. We watch a lot of games. We'll even watch them together as we're on the phone sometimes during certain parts of games. And I think as much as we want to blame players or give players credit on how to win, sometimes it's the same thing with the coaching staff. Do you know how to win? Now, last week, we didn't have a podcast. I had an issue with Jim Caldwell going for it on 4th down and short at the goal line, 4th and 1. Because I think you take the points, I think you take the field goal, and I think you reclaim the lead. And somebody said to me, yeah, if they'd done that, then that 97-yard touchdown pass never would have happened. I don't know that. I mean, hell, the kickoff could have gone, it could have squibbed the following kickoff. They could have been stuck at the 3, and they could have done the exact same thing. You don't know that. Chances are it's not, but you don't know that. That's not even the point. The point is you take the opportunity to take the lead. I don't want a coach who's going to, and I don't think Jim Caldwell does this by any stretch, but I don't want a coach who coaches for the fans. You can't do that. Because you're the one with your neck on the line, not the fans. The fans can sit there and go, I'd go for it every single time on 4th down. Yeah, and you'd lose your job really quick. Last time I checked, field goals count too. Points matter. It may not be the way you want to win it. You may not say to yourself out loud, yeah, here's a really good way to win a football game. Let me kick 6 field goals. Listen, if it gets you a victory, it doesn't really matter, okay? I promise you that, because there are no style points. There's none whatsoever. I don't think it really matters to teams if they're going into somebody else's building or even if they're holding serve, that they get the chance to get a victory. If there's a chance to win and it comes off the foot of your kicker instead of the arm of your quarterback or the legs of your running back, who cares? You don't think a team like Dallas would love to have that game against the Packers back? They lost by 4. If it meant they could have gotten 2 more field goals instead of 2 punts, you're damn right they want that. That doesn't matter to them. All that matters is getting the win in the first place. I think Philly's a really good team, don't you? Yeah, I mean they're suddenly they've surged ahead in the various odds to win the Super Bowl. They've won some tight games, man. That game against Washington was really close. If not for a late touchdown, that game is a 1-score game. They barely beat the Chargers. They barely beat the Giants. You know what? They beat the Chargers by a field goal. They beat the Panthers, or they beat the Chargers by a field goal and the Giants by a field goal. So last time I checked, it mattered. To me, if it requires points, if it requires taking the lead, and your offense just ain't quite there yet, I'm kicking that field goal. But that's a couple of weeks ago. Let's see what happens against Green Bay tonight. I don't have a great feeling about it, especially because of what Green Bay does so well after the bye. And this will be the 3rd team, by the way, Detroit faces after the bye this year. Think about that. How many teams have had to do something like that? The Lions have had to play 3 teams. New Orleans came off a bye. Green Bay comes off a bye. Oh, Cleveland's the other one. So they haven't played them yet. But they will be coming off a bye. How many teams got to do that? Shep Shower and Shave, brought to you by Northwestern Tech. Heating and cooling employers are desperate for trained technicians. They're having to turn down work because they're unable to meet the growing demand. They need some individuals who know what they're doing. Call some of the big HVAC companies in the area. Ask them where you should go, and I guarantee it's going to be unanimous. Northwestern Tech. It's the HVAC school that gets you trained, certified, and into the field in only 10.5 months. We're brought to you by Hungry Howie's. Hungry Howie's has the perfect fundraiser for your sports team or school group. All you got to do is go to fundraiser.com, and we're brought to you by Nate Noth Designs. So we talked about the team that is searching for its or trying to shake its identity. How about the teams, plural, that have rediscovered their identity? When I was a kid, Michigan State was always viewed as an inferior team to Michigan, but one that was big, strong, and tough to knock off. Now the former is no longer the case, but the latter is. Now, let me, before we dive into this conversation or discussion, I would say this. Last week, I was shaking my head at how the hell Michigan State loses to Northwestern. Northwestern's now won 3 straight overtime games, but they lost 39-31. How do you lose at Northwestern and then beat one of the better teams in America, in Penn State? It's funky, isn't it? That's sports. That's the way football goes. That's the way sports goes in general. It's a hell of a win over Penn State. Rediscovering their identity is this, and creating a new one, quite honestly. They've created themselves a bit of a passing team. They didn't rush for very many yards Saturday. But Brian Lewerke's the real deal. 2 straight games of 400 yards or more, the 2 highest totals in Michigan State football history. That's impressive. But defensively, toughness, strength up front, big boy football. That's who they are. That's who they've been before. That's what's allowed them to be first placed first place in the Big Ten East. Saquon Barkley is a really, really special player. He's a hell of a tailback. And I know some people think like the junior gets too much love, the comparisons to Barry Sanders and so on and so forth. Folks, this cat ran for 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns last year, okay? I mean, he got it done. It was really impressive. This year, time and time again, 172 against Akron, 211 against Iowa, 108 against Michigan, right? In fairness, back-to-back games where he's been stifled. He had 21 carries against Ohio State, only gained 44 yards. What Michigan State did so well against Penn State is tell the Nittany Lions, you're not even giving the football. He is not going to get the football. He had 14 carries, that's it. Only once has he had fewer than that. And that was against Georgia State, in which Penn State won 56-0. What's he even playing for? You know what I mean? Just to get the blood flowing a little bit. And he might have been hurt in that game, I'm not even sure. But he only had 10 carries. In other words, Michigan State made Trace McSorley and James Franklin think, you know what? We ain't going to be able to do this. So in order for us to be successful, we're going to have to throw the football. And in fairness to Trace McSorley, they threw for almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. But that Michigan State defense can be very opportunistic. It's a beautiful thing. They have rediscovered themselves with that identity. Sure. Michigan the same way. More teams are trying to tell them, or should be trying to tell them. And I'm not sure how much P.J. Fleck truly did this. Everybody loves him because of what he did at Western, and it was a hell of an accomplishment. The whole running down to the 25-yard line, and my team's got to beat me there, and the whole row the boat and stuff. I'm telling you, man, it's great when it works in terms of team victories, but when it doesn't work, you look really foolish. Just go about your business and coach your football team and let them see what they can do. You got one win in the Big Ten, dude. And it's not fair to completely criticize him and say he's worthless. That's not fair at all. He's a good football coach. Just the whole look at me antic gets a little much, all right? And you've stepped up in competition. You should be concentrating on some other things. But anyway, what Michigan did is rediscover their identity. They have always been. See, it's so everybody wants to be a glamorous football team. They do. It's tough to be Wisconsin, where you got a bunch of big, tough, nasty, fat, strong guys up front that look at you and just say, we're going to shove it down your throat today. I hope you know that. They basically tell you that. We're going to shove it right down your throat. Don't think you're going to do anything special against us. Here's what we do. We run power, we run sweep, we run between the guards, and we're going to shove it right up your Adam's apple. That's why they ran for 237 yards against Indiana. That's what they do. But it's not glamorous. And many people feel like, well, if you get behind, you can't come back on that. Well, they don't get behind very often, all right? Michigan used to be the same way. Now, they've had some really good quarterbacks play at the next level in Ann Arbor, come out of the program, but for the most part, they were always viewed as a rushing football team. Minnesota should have put 9 guys in the flipping box and basically said, I want to see if Brandon Peters can do it. They didn't. Michigan did. And Wolverines said, Higdon, Evans, 200 yards. As a team, 371. And by the way, it was better than that if it weren't for Brandon Peters taking some sacks and getting a minus 23 in the rushing game. Peters isn't the reason this team is winning. He's stabilized it a little bit. He's throwing some checkdowns. He's throwing some crossing patterns, some slants, some easier reads, right? The reason this team is better, the reason this team is winning, is because the 5 guys, sometimes it's 6 and sometimes it's 7 when they bring those guys in, it's those big nasties up front, like I just talked about with Wisconsin, who are just tough SOBs and want to shove it down your throat. That's the reason they're better, in addition to the defense. Their defense was outstanding. And I know it's Minnesota. Minnesota only gained 36 yards in the second half. I mean, they basically told the Golden Gophers, you're not ready yet. Sorry. You may think you are. They did the same thing to Purdue, right? Earlier in the season. Go ahead, beat Illinois. I mean, think about Minnesota for a second. They've lost to Maryland, who just lost to Rutgers. They were beaten up at Purdue. They barely lost to Michigan State, but that was in Minneapolis. They lost to Iowa, and they just got steamrolled by Michigan. Not a very good football team. But you can't take that away from the team that just did it because they beat them soundly. They beat them handily. And that's oftentimes what we as a fan base look for. Now, I've been critical of Michigan before because I've said, hey, listen, I know you're out there beating the likes of Purdue and Indiana and Rutgers and Minnesota, and you'll beat Maryland, and that's all fine and dandy. But what you got to do is you got to beat Michigan State, and you didn't. You got to beat Penn State. It wasn't even close. And at the end of the season, you got to beat Wisconsin and Ohio State. That's the way you salvage things. And that's asking an awful lot. Ohio State's at home. They just got steamrolled by Iowa, man. It's not like they aren't vulnerable. They can be beaten. And Wisconsin, with all due respect to the Badgers, who I like a lot, and I have great respect for. I think Paul Chryst has done a really nice job there. I've said this time and time again. A guy like Brett Bielema could have stayed there forever and done what he was supposed to do and been a threat for a Big Ten title on a regular basis. And Wisconsin's got to go, or they host Iowa. They're at Minnesota at the end of the year. They're looking at their schedule. Don't kid yourself. If you're a Badgers fan, what are you thinking right now? 12-0. You're going to beat Iowa at home. You're going to be favored to beat Michigan at home. And you should be able to kick Penn State right down the road. Their schedule, and I know they're ranked, they're 9-0. What are they ranked? 6th now? Something like that. Their schedule, nothing. BYU's not that good. I thought that was winning in Provo was the big deal right there. Everybody else, think about it, folks. They played Northwestern, Nebraska, Purdue, Maryland, Illinois, Indiana. Nothing. So if you're Michigan, so if you're Wisconsin, you're going to be favored in each of the next 3 games, and rightfully so. If you're Michigan and you're a Michigan fan and you expect to get the job done against Maryland, you don't think you can go into Wisconsin? You should have some confidence. I know you got steamrolled by Penn State. The Michigan State thing, you may be using the excuse of the weather, which isn't fair because Michigan State had to play in the same weather. But don't tell me you can't go into Camp Randall and go, you know what? These guys run really well. Our defense has been the big reason we've been successful this year. We feel like we can stop them, make Alex Honenbrook beat you through the air. Try your best to contain that running game. Be physical up front. Do what you can against a guy like, because he's Jonathan Taylor, he's just a freshman. He's going to have his day. He's going to have some big plays. This dude's really good, man. 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns so far this year. Love him. Absolutely love him. Might think he's better than, he's having a better year than Saquon Barkley. Now they haven't played the same competition, but you get my point. He's a hell of a player, and he's just a freshman. But if you're Michigan, you got to be thinking, we play that style right at Wisconsin, knowing that Wisconsin hasn't been tested like we have, we got a shot. And then anything can happen with Ohio State at the end. Doesn't do a whole lot of good for the Big Ten, because the Big Ten will not have a team in the Final Four. There's no way. Michigan State would be that legitimate, opportunistic team had they not lost to Northwestern. And they run the table and beat an undefeated Wisconsin team in the Big Ten title game. You could absolutely make that case. I would too. The loss to Northwestern is going to come back and kill you. Not that it's a bad thing to win the Big Ten. It's a hell of an accomplishment if they get there. They got to get by Ohio State next week, and that's not going to be easy either. Shep, Shower, and Shave brought to you by Northwestern Tech, by Hungry Howie's, and by Nate Noth Designs. All right. the other team or teams that are trying to create identities. Pistons and Red Wings. I want you to be honest with yourself. And look, it's really early. I get it. But at some point, you're going to have a judgment on a team. At some point, I don't know when that is. You know, baseball, the Sparky Anderson 40 game thing. We're 10 games in, right? An eighth of the season. Not even an eighth of the season. But this Piston team, beating Milwaukee, very good, right? Beating the Warriors and Clippers on the road, feathers in your cap. Hanging right there with Washington. Didn't like that you got behind so big early on, but hung in there. You got 2 losses of your 3 that you'd like to have back because you don't think they're as good as you are. Lakers and Sixers. This is a team now with Andre Drummond shooting the way he is from the free throw line and staying on the floor in the fourth quarter. And the depth that they have. I'm not going to get carried away. I'm not going to say they're going to win the division. I'm not going to tell you this should be an Eastern Conference contender. I'm just telling you, you get a steady player like Tobias Harris and Avery Bradley. I love Tobias Harris. I love the fact that this is a guy who goes about his craft the way he does. I called the game in L.A. against the Clippers. I was out there walking around a little bit during the day, saw him eating well, saw him he was in the gym first thing in the morning, ate breakfast near him, not with him at the same table, noticed what he was eating, all healthy stuff, really takes his craft seriously and professionally. Love Avery Bradley, what he brings to the table, ability to shoot from the outside, the ability to rebound, one of the best 6'2" and under guards, rebounding guards in the NBA, and defensively. And I think it has been a little bit more contagious for a guy like Reggie Jackson. Now, Reggie Jackson's not shooting very well. That should be a little concerning. But what Andre Drummond what they've been able to do, Greg Kelser pointed out during our broadcast against Sacramento. I called that game from Little Caesars Arena on Fox Sports Detroit. It's different. Andre Drummond is being allowed to do some different things. It's not just, I'm going to pick, you're going to roll with me, and then I roll to the basket. He's being able to get the ball on the outside and create to a certain extent. So he's got to be loving life. I mean, Stanley Johnson's been pretty good defensively, right? Not very good offensively, but he gives you something, and he gives you some hustle when he's truly engaged. And then with your bench, Ish Smith, Anthony Tolliver, whose defense has been a difference. He was the primary reason they were able to come back and beat New York in New York against Kristaps Porzingis because of his defense. And Langston Galloway. Langston Galloway is an underrated performer. I'm not saying it's the best bench in the East, the division, of the league. I'm just telling you, you get guys with defined roles, you feel a lot better about yourself. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I'm a little disappointed that Henry Ellenson isn't involved as much as I thought he might be. John Lure has not made a triple. He's not made a 3 all season long. That's concerning. And I was hoping to see more of Luke Kennard than I've seen instead of just 5 games. Because I'd like to see them create an opportunity for him to shoot the ball a little bit. But so far, they've been a fun team to watch. It's not just about the wins either. I mean, in order to get fannies in the seats at Little Caesars Arena, they're going to have to play a fun brand of basketball, and they've been better. It's been fun. Speaking of fun, how fun have the Red Wings been? I know they're just a 500 team, and I'm not calling them a cup contender by any stretch. But here's what I love about them. And it's a team that's got, I mean, with the win over Edmonton last night, Edmonton's supposed to be this really fast team, right? Detroit looked just as fast as they did. I mean, Mike Babcock's the savant in Toronto, correct? Okay. They got one more point than the Wings. That's it. One more point. Tampa's the best team in the East. I don't think there's any question about that. Really like what the Kings and the Blues have done early on. But look, for this Detroit team, when you get a line like Mantha and Larkin and Athanasiou, as long as they are, I keep using the word engaged, but you've got to be into it. It's hard for young players to remember what has created their success and then be able to duplicate that night in and night out. I was talking with somebody the other day as I was putting my Red Wings wingspan feature together on Henrik Zetterberg, who's been awesome. He really has. And I was talking about Andreas Athanasiou. How do you describe him? Could you describe him as a top six forward? Really insightful response. The best teams in hockey have 4 elite players. Elite. Okay? In other words, they're as good as anybody at their position. So let's take Tampa, for example. Stamkos, Kucherov, right? That's 2. Victor Hedman is probably another one. Might be missing. I guess you Vasilevsky would be the other. Those are elite. There's 4 for you right there. Does Detroit have them? I don't know the answer to that right now, and maybe nobody does. But here's what we do know: Mantha, Larkin, Athanasiou, they don't have anybody on defense. Who's got a shot? Those 3 guys have the chance to be elite. Zetterberg used to be. Zetterberg and Datsuk were elite. That allowed the bridge. That allowed the playoff run to continue, right? Cronwall was elite at one time. Those 3 guys, when healthy, they were elite. It's hard to say that about Zetterberg now, even though he's been very, very good and very consistent. Those young guys that we're talking about, if they bring it every single night, if they do what they're supposed to do every single night, they carry the weight of this franchise on their shoulders. They really do. Those are the guys who must be in that elite status. Look at the games in which this team you look at and say, wow, they're really good tonight. Last night was one of them. It might be different tonight against Vancouver because Vancouver kicked the crap out of them first time they met them. But against Edmonton, Anthony Mantha, Martin Ferk, Dylan Larkin, all super involved, right? Really, really good. It might take Athanasiou a little bit of time. Mantha's been, you could argue, he's been this team's best player. He's got 7 goals. He's got 13 points. It's tied for the team lead. And he's a plus. I don't have many players who are plus. Got a few that are right there on the edge, right? Dylan Larkin, 13 points, a plus. Remember what the big complaint was a year ago? And by the way, everybody tells me, Ozzy, Darren Elliott, people tell me, he looks really comfortable. Really, really comfortable. Much more so than a year ago. Looks like a legitimate center now. Last year, the big concern, he was a minus 28. It's off to a really good plus 3 start. So it's 500. I get it. It's, upper half of the division, of the conference, probably, right now. But those 3 guys, if they continue, especially Mantha and Larkin, when those guys are clicking, speed, strength, size, 200 feet. That's what comes to mind with those 3 guys. The question is, do they have the intellect, the heart, and the desire to keep it up, to do it night in and night out? That is not easy to do. That can be a very difficult thing to figure out. And we got to remember that. Anthony Mantha is 23 years old. That's it. Still learning a little bit. Not a complete player. Dylan Larkin, I know he's played, this is his 3rd season. He's only 21, man. It's tough for us to be patient with that. Andreas Athanasiou, he's 23. Therein lies my point, though. Because of their age and their skill, Martin Ferk's only 24. Those guys are the heart and soul, and they have to lead this team. They have to be the guys who are creating the identity of the Red Wings. And then they'll get back into the playoff push. Shep, Shower, and Shave brought to you by Northwestern Tech. Call them today, if you're ready to change careers. And they got flexible scheduling, by the way, that allows you to keep working your job while training for an actual career. Call them today, 248-358-4006. By Nate Noth Designs. See his work on Instagram and on Facebook. He designed the Shep Shower and Shave logo. And by Hungry Howie's, the Michigan-based pizza company known as the original Flavored Crust Pizza and the best fundraiser around. Just go to doughraiser.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast edition of Shep Shower and Shave.